At my sister's 32nd birthday party, she raised her glass and made a toast that stopped my heart. To the family ATM, she said, looking straight at me. May she someday be free. The room erupted in laughter. I smiled and played along, but inside, something shattered. When I finally understood what that toast really meant, I realized my entire family had been using me for years, and I'd been too blind to see it. It was supposed to be a celebration. Serena's birthday party at Meridian, this trendy rooftop restaurant in downtown Denver, with views of the Rocky Mountains that cost more per person than most people spend on groceries in a week. The whole Castellano family was there. My parents, Vincent and Gloria, my aunt Delphine and uncle Ricardo, my cousins Joaquin and Catalina, even my 89-year-old grandmother, Esperanza, who rarely leaves her assisted living facility anymore. Everyone was dressed to the nines, the champagne was Dom Perignon, and for once, we actually looked like the sophisticated, successful family we always pretended to be on social media. I remember adjusting my new Diane von Furstenberg wrap dress, navy blue with tiny gold geometric patterns, as I looked around the table. The dress had cost me $800, which was insane for my budget, but Serena had specifically mentioned wanting everyone to dress appropriately for the venue when she sent the invitation. Translation, don't embarrass me by looking poor. I'd charged it to my credit card and told myself it was an investment, professional attire, something I could wear to client meetings at my consulting firm. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was the one person at the table who actually had to worry about the cost of appropriate attire. My name is Valentina Castellano, and I'm 34 years old. At the time of this story, I was a senior business consultant at Morrison & Associates, pulling in a decent six-figure salary, analyzing supply chain inefficiencies for mid-sized companies. Not wealthy by Denver standards, but comfortable. Comfortable enough to have my own one-bedroom condo in the Highland neighborhood, comfortable enough to lease a reliable Honda Accord, comfortable enough to take the occasional vacation to somewhere warm in February when the Colorado winter started getting to me. What I wasn't comfortable enough for, apparently, was saying no to my family. The restaurant was everything Serena had promised when she'd insisted on celebrating there instead of somewhere more reasonable. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the city skyline, the tables were set with actual crystal and real silverware, and the waitstaff moved with that particular brand of discretion that screams, "This meal will cost more than your rent." The kind of place where the menu doesn't list prices and the water comes in bottles that cost more than a fast food meal. I was sitting between my cousin Catalina and my father, diagonal from Serena, who was holding court at the head of the table like the birthday queen she'd always seen herself as. She looked radiant, I'll give her that. Her dark hair was styled in perfect beachy waves that definitely required professional help. Her makeup was flawless in that effortless way that actually takes hours to achieve. And she was wearing a silk emerald green dress that complemented her olive skin beautifully. The dress, I happened to know, was Isabel Marant and cost more than some people's monthly salary. I knew this because I'd been with her when she bought it. Or rather, I knew this because I'd been with her when I bought it. Doesn't Serena look absolutely stunning? My mother Gloria gushed to the table at large, her own champagne glass already half empty despite the fact that we had only been seated for 20 minutes. Mom had a talent for getting tipsy just quickly enough to say all the things she was thinking, but sober enough to claim she didn't remember them later. That dress is exquisite. Is it new, darling? Serena did a little shimmy in her seat, making the silk catch the light. Brand new, she confirmed with a brilliant smile. I fell in love with it the moment I saw it. Sometimes you just have to treat yourself, you know? Treat yourself, as if she'd been the one working 60-hour weeks to afford it. My father Vincent nodded approvingly, cutting into his $48 Wagyu beef tenderloin. You work hard, you deserve nice things, which was rich coming from a man who'd been between opportunities for the past 18 months, while still somehow maintaining his membership at the Denver Country Club. Absolutely, chimed in my Aunt Delphine, who was wearing what I was pretty sure was a vintage Chanel suit that she'd owned for decades, but still looked impeccable in. Life's too short not to enjoy the finer things. Easy to say when someone else is paying for them. I took a careful sip of my champagne,
Real Dom Perignon, which I'd never tasted before and probably wouldn't again unless someone else was picking up the tab, and tried to calculate in my head how much this dinner was going to cost. The restaurant had a prix-fixe birthday menu at $180 per person, plus drinks, plus tax, and tip. 12 people. I was looking at easily $3,000, probably closer to $4,000 by the time everyone had their fill of premium cocktails and after-dinner cognac. When Serena had first suggested Meridian for her birthday dinner, I assumed we'd be splitting the check. That's what normal families do, right? Everyone pays their own way. Maybe the birthday person gets a pass on their meal. But as the wine flowed and the conversation got more animated, I started noticing little things. The way my parents relaxed completely, ordering appetizers and expensive bottles without glancing at the prices. The way my aunt and uncle settled into their seats like they were at an all-inclusive resort. The way my cousins started ordering top-shelf liquor like it was water.
And the way Serena kept catching my eye with that knowing little smile whenever someone ordered something particularly extravagant. The realization crept up on me slowly, like a cold draft under a door. They were all assuming I was paying. Not hoping, not planning to ask, assuming, like it was already decided, like it had always been decided. I thought back to the invitation Serena had sent 3 weeks earlier. Beautiful cardstock, professionally designed, with elegant script that read, "You're invited to celebrate Serena's 32nd birthday at Meridian Restaurant. Cocktails at 7 p.m., dinner to follow. Dress code, cocktail elegant. RSVP by October 15th. What it didn't say was, Valentina will be covering the check for everyone, as usual. But looking around the table now, watching my family order with the casual confidence of people who knew they weren't paying, I realized that information had been communicated through different channels. Probably a family group chat that I wasn't included in. Probably conversations that happened when I wasn't around. Probably assumptions so deeply ingrained that they didn't even need to be stated anymore. "Val, you're being awfully quiet," my cousin Joaquin observed, reaching across the table to refill my champagne glass without asking. Joaquin was 29, charming in that effortless way that had gotten him through life without ever having to work particularly hard at anything. He'd graduated from CU Boulder with a communications degree and had been finding himself professionally ever since, which mostly involved a series of part-time jobs in trendy industries like craft brewing and social media management. "You're not having fun?" "I'm having a great time," I lied smoothly, giving him the smile I'd perfected over years of family gatherings. Warm but not effusive, engaged but not overeager. The smile of someone who was grateful to be included but knew her place. Just enjoying listening to everyone catch up. "Valentina's always been the observer in the family," my grandmother Esperanza said fondly, reaching over to pat my hand with her papery fingers. Even as a little girl, she would sit back and watch everything before deciding what to do. So thoughtful, so careful. Careful, that was the word everyone always used to describe me. Never spontaneous or fun or adventurous. Careful, responsible, reliable. The one who thought things through, who considered consequences, who could be counted on to handle the details that no one else wanted to deal with. "That's our Val," my father agreed, raising his glass in a mini toast, always thinking ahead, always making sure everyone's taken care of. The way he said it made my stomach twist. There was affection in his voice, genuine warmth, but there was something else too. Something that sounded almost like expectation. Like he was describing a service I provided rather than a personality trait I happened to have. "Remember when she was 16 and she planned my entire quinceañera?" Serena jumped in, her eyes bright with wine and nostalgia. Every detail, down to the color of the napkins. She spent weeks researching vendors and comparing prices, making spreadsheets and timelines. I didn't have to worry about anything. "Because you were 15 and should have been focusing on school, not event planning," I said mildly, though I remembered that quinceañera very differently than she apparently did. I remembered staying up until midnight for weeks, calling caterers and DJs and florists, trying to find options that fit our parents' budget while still giving Serena the fairy tale celebration she'd been dreaming about since she was 12. And it was perfect, my mother added, her voice warm with memory. Absolutely perfect. You have such a gift for that kind of thing, Valentina, making everything work out beautifully. Making everything work out. Another one of those phrases that sounded like a compliment but felt like a job description. The conversation flowed on, lubricated by expensive wine and the kind of nostalgic storytelling that families engage in when they're feeling sentimental. Stories about vacations and holidays and celebrations, most of which I'd either organized, funded, or both. The family trip to Cancun for my parents' 25th anniversary. I'd researched resorts and booked flights. My cousin Catalina's college graduation party. I'd handled the catering and rented the venue. Uncle Ricardo's surprise 50th birthday celebration. I'd coordinated with his friends and managed the guest list. Listening to these stories, framed as they were as evidence of what a wonderful, close-knit family we were, I started to notice a pattern I'd been too close to see before. In every single memory they were sharing, I was the one doing the work while everyone else got to enjoy the results. And what about that time when Joaquin's car broke down in Aspen and he needed a ride home? Catalina was saying, giggling as she recounted what was apparently a hilarious family legend. Remember how panicked he was, stranded in the mountains with no way to get back to Denver? I wasn't panicked, Joaquin protested, but he was grinning. I was strategically assessing my options. You called me crying, Serena accused, pointing her fork at him. I did not cry, Joaquin insisted. I may have been emotionally expressive about my situation. Lucky for you, our saint of a sister drove 6 hours round trip to rescue you, Serena continued, turning to beam at me. Without even being asked, she just saw his post on Instagram and knew he needed help. That's what family does, I said automatically, the response so ingrained it came out without conscious thought. But even as I said it, I found myself wondering, was it though? Was driving 6 hours to rescue a grown man who had made poor decisions really what family did? Or was it what I did, while everyone else sat back and let me? Exactly, my father exclaimed, clapping me on the shoulder with enough force to rattle my teeth. That's exactly what family does. We take care of each other. We, as if the taking care was a mutual activity rather than a one-way street with me as the permanent service provider. The waitstaff appeared as if by magic to clear our dinner plates and present the dessert course, an elaborate chocolate soufflé with gold leaf that probably cost more than most people spend on a nice dinner for two. Along with the dessert came a bottle of aged cognac that my uncle had ordered for the table, meaning for everyone else to enjoy, while I mentally calculated the additional cost. It was while we were savoring the ridiculously expensive dessert that Serena stood up, tapping her champagne glass with her dessert spoon to get everyone's attention. The crystal rang like a tiny bell, clear and bright in the ambient noise of the restaurant. I want to make a toast, she announced, her voice carrying that slight musical quality that meant she'd had just enough alcohol to feel performative, but not enough to be sloppy. Serena had always been good at calibrating her alcohol intake for maximum effect. To my incredible family, who's always been there for me through absolutely everything. Everyone around the table turned toward her expectantly, faces soft with wine and sentiment. My mother was already getting that misty-eyed look she got during emotional moments. My father was nodding approvingly before she'd even finished her thought. My grandmother was smiling with the patient indulgence of someone who'd watched dozens of grandchildren make dozens of toasts over the decades. I know I'm not always the easiest person to deal with, Serena continued, and everyone laughed because it was true, but said with enough self-awareness to be charming rather than annoying. I know I can be demanding and particular and maybe a little bit high maintenance. A little bit? Joaquin interjected, earning another round of laughter. Okay, a lot high maintenance, Serena conceded with a grin. But you all put up with me anyway. You support my dreams, you celebrate my successes, you pick me up when I fall down. You make everything possible. She paused for a moment, looking around a table with genuine affection, and I felt that familiar warmth that came from being part of something bigger than myself. Despite everything, despite the growing unease I've been feeling about the financial dynamics, I loved these people. They were complicated and sometimes selfish and often thoughtless, but they were my family. They were the people who knew me before I became the careful, responsible version of myself I presented to the world. But especially, Serena continued, and her tone shifted slightly, becoming more pointed, I want to thank our very own family ATM. The warmth in my chest turned to ice. She turned to look directly at me, and her smile changed. It was still affectionate, still warm, but there was something else in it now. Something that looked almost like pity? Amusement? I couldn't quite identify it, but it made my skin crawl. My amazing sister Valentina, she said, gesturing toward me with her champagne glass. The gesture was theatrical, practiced, like she'd been planning this moment. Who's always ready to make a withdrawal from her heart and her wallet. The table erupted in laughter, genuine, delighted laughter that filled the space around us and drew glances from neighboring tables. My uncle Ricardo was practically choking on his cognac. My cousin Catalina was clapping like this was the most brilliant joke she'd ever heard. My father was laughing so hard he had to wipe tears from his eyes with his napkin. "Oh, that's perfect," my mother gasped between giggles. "Family ATM, that's exactly what she is." Always dispensing exactly what we need, exactly when we need it, my Aunt Delphine added, raising her own glass, and never asking for anything in return. Available 24/7 for all our emergency withdrawals, Joaquim chimed in, which sent everyone into fresh peals of laughter. I felt my face arrange itself into a smile. I felt myself laugh along with them, because what else could I do? The entire table was staring at me, waiting for me to be a good sport about this, waiting for me to prove that I could take a joke, that I wasn't too sensitive, that I was still the reliable, easygoing Valentina they'd always known. But inside, something was cracking. Because as I looked around the table at their laughing faces, I realized they weren't joking. Not really. They were telling the truth, and they thought it was funny. May she someday be free, Serena finished, raising her glass high in the air. To Valentina, the most generous person I know, and to the day when she finally stops letting us take advantage of her. The laughter reached a crescendo. Everyone was raising their glasses, toasting me, celebrating this brilliant observation about my role in the family, celebrating my financial servitude like it was something to be proud of. I raised my glass too. I smiled. I took a sip of champagne that tasted like ash in my mouth. But inside, that crack was spreading, becoming a chasm, becoming a complete break from everything I thought I understood about my relationship with these people. Because Serena was right. They had been taking advantage of me for years. And not only did they know it, they found it amusing. They found my inability to say no charming. They found my financial contributions so reliable that they could joke about them at dinner parties. I was their ATM, their personal bank, their go-to solution for any financial inconvenience or expensive whim. And I had been so busy being grateful for their love and attention that I had never stopped to ask what exactly I was getting in return. The toast ended with everyone clinking glasses and settling back into their seats, the conversation flowing seamlessly into other topics, as if nothing particularly significant had just happened, as if my sister hadn't just publicly acknowledged that my entire family saw me as a source of funding rather than a person. I sat there in my $800 dress, surrounded by people I loved, at a dinner that was going to cost me $4,000, and felt more alone than I had ever felt in my life. And that was just the beginning. To understand how devastating that toast really was, I need to take you back to the beginning, back to when being the responsible one felt like a choice instead of a trap. Growing up in the Castellano household meant growing up with chaos disguised as passion. My parents, Vincent and Gloria, were the kind of people who lived their lives at full volume. Big emotions, grand gestures, dramatic declarations about everything from politics to what to have for dinner. They fought loudly and loved loudly and spent money loudly. always convinced that whatever financial crisis they were currently navigating was temporary, just a small bump on the road to inevitable success. My father was a serial entrepreneur, which sounds impressive until you realize it's just a fancy way of saying he couldn't keep a job. He'd had his real estate license for 20 years, but only worked sporadically, usually when Mom threatened to divorce him if he didn't start contributing to the household income. He'd sell a house or two, make decent commission, and immediately start planning his next big venture, a food truck business that lasted 3 months, a consulting firm that existed mostly on business cards, a partnership with his brother-in-law importing artisanal olive oil that ended in a screaming match at Christmas dinner and never got mentioned again. My mother worked as an office manager for a dental practice, which provided the steady income that kept us housed and fed, but she treated her salary like play money. Every paycheck brought new justifications for purchases they couldn't afford. New furniture, because we spent so much time at home, we deserve to be comfortable. A vacation, because we work so hard, we need to recharge. Designer handbags, because quality is an investment. The math never worked, but somehow the bills always got paid. As a kid, I assumed this was just how adult life functioned, a mysterious process where money appeared when you needed it and disappeared just as quickly. I was 8 years old when I first realized our family was different from other families. It was during a sleepover at my friend Katie's house, a modest ranch home in Lakewood where everything matched and nothing looked new, but nothing looked broken either. Katie's mom made us grilled cheese sandwiches for lunch, and when Katie asked if she could have a soda with her sandwich, her mom said, "We don't have soda in the house, honey. You know that." Not, "We can't afford soda," or "Soda is too expensive." Just, "We don't have soda." Like it was a conscious choice rather than a financial constraint. At our house, the refrigerator was always stocked with name brand everything. Coca-Cola instead of store brand, fancy Greek yogurt instead of regular, organic milk that cost twice as much as the regular kind. But we also had collection notices taped to the front door and whispered phone conversations about payment plans and my parents taking turns using each other's credit cards when one got declined. It was confusing for a kid. Were we rich or poor? Successful or struggling? The evidence pointed in both directions. What I learned, through careful observation and accidental eavesdropping, was that we were neither. We were performance artists, creating an elaborate show of prosperity while living paycheck to paycheck and credit limit to credit limit. The show was the point. The actual financial stability was secondary. Serena, 3 years younger than me, absorbed these lessons differently. Where I became anxious about money, constantly calculating costs and consequences, she became convinced that money was just another problem that solved itself if you ignored it long enough. Where I started checking price tags and comparing options, she started assuming that wanting something was the same as being able to afford it. "Don't be so worried about everything," my mother would say when she caught me reading the bills that came in the mail, trying to understand why the numbers in red were always bigger than the numbers in black. Money isn't everything. We always figure it out. And they did figure it out, somehow. The lights stayed on, the mortgage got paid, we never went hungry. But figuring it out seemed to involve an enormous amount of stress and drama, and late-night phone calls to relatives and friends asking for just a little help to get through a temporary rough patch.
By the time I was in high school, I'd started working part-time at a local bookstore, officially to save money for college, but really because I couldn't stand the constant financial anxiety that permeated our house. Having my own money, even if it was just $8 an hour, felt like having a life preserver in rough seas. Serena, meanwhile, was becoming the family princess. She was naturally charismatic in a way I'd never been, with an easy laugh and a talent for making people feel like the most interesting person in the room when she focused her attention on them. She was also beautiful in that effortless way that some people are just born with. Long, dark hair that always looked perfect, olive skin that tanned evenly, bright green eyes that photographed beautifully. More importantly, she was fun. Where I was careful and anxious and always thinking 3 steps ahead, Serena was spontaneous and optimistic and confident that everything would work out in her favor. She made people want to give her things, want to make her happy, want to be the person who solved whatever small problem she was currently facing. Our parents adored this about her. They loved her spirit, her confidence, her absolute certainty that she deserved good things. They enabled it, encouraged it, and celebrated it. When Serena wanted something, a new dress for homecoming, a car for her 16th birthday, spending money for a school trip, they found a way to make it happen, even when making it happen meant maxing out another credit card or borrowing against my father's retirement account. When I wanted things, the conversation was different, more complex. There were discussions about budgets and priorities and whether what I wanted was really necessary. Not because they loved me less, but because they trusted me to understand limitations in a way they didn't trust Serena to. Which should have been flattering, but mostly felt exhausting. I learned to want less, to ask for less, to make myself smaller and more manageable and more grateful for whatever attention and resources were left over after Serena's needs were met. I learned to be the responsible one. And somehow, without anyone explicitly deciding this was how it would work, being the responsible one became being the one who took responsibility for everyone else's irresponsibility. By the time I graduated college with a business degree and a job offer from Morrison and Associates, my family had a new understanding of how money worked in our household. It worked through me.